The next strategy I want to talk about for reducing anxiety is to think about what the worst that might happen would be. Now, you may say this would make you more anxious, but actually, if you start thinking, well, how bad would it be really? You start thinking, well, it's actually not that bad. And I think the big thing is to divide it between the things you can affect and the things that you can't. And I met somebody a few months ago and she said to me, Chris, aren't you worried? I said, well, what about? She said, well, North Korea. Because at the time, there was a lot of tension going on between America and North Korea, and the Chinese were sort of involved. And I remember thinking, well, I don't want to be blown up by North Korea. But on the other hand, I can't do anything about it. It's not worth me worrying about North Korea. So the first thing is just put out of your mind anything that you can't do anything about. Now, the things that you can do something about are worth thinking about. So the first thing is, how can we avoid it happening? So suppose you've got to do a presentation, you're really anxious about your laptop failing. How can you avoid that? Well, charge it up beforehand, check it, maybe make sure there's a spare, maybe go with 2 laptops. I used to worry about whether their laptop would be any good when I did presentations. So I always bring my own now, and I've got my own remote clipper, I've got my own everything, because then I know it's not going to happen. So the first thing is, how can I avoid whatever that risk is happening to me? And then you think, would it be that bad? What would be the end of the world if my laptop didn't work and I had to do the talk without? Would it matter that much? It might even be better. A friend of mine used to, he was a James Bond stunt man when he was younger, and he used to do a talk about one of the stunts he did. It was in the one where the boat goes over the waterfall. Would it be Thunderball? It was one of the Roger Moore ones. No, Thunderball was Sean Connery, wasn't it? But it was one of the Roger Moore ones. Moonraker, that was it. And the boat goes over the waterfall, and the baddie escapes. You think he's going to die, but he hang glides away because he's got part of his boat detaches and becomes a hang glider. And this friend of mine did that stunt because it was before computers and CGI. So they actually went to the Amazon or somewhere and actually went over a waterfall. They could only do 1 take, and he did it. And nobody knew whether the downdraft of the air was going to mean that he died horribly, but he was prepared to risk it for 100 quid or something. So he did it. So he's got this really great talk that he does about how he was the James Bond stuntman. And one time he turned up, and this was in the days of a carousel of slides. And he turned up, he drove for an hour, got there, walked up onto the stage, opened up his slides, and the box was completely empty. And he just sort of brought the wrong box. And there was no way he could drive home and get it and come back, and it'd be 2 hours. So what he decided to do is he did the whole talk with no slides. And he just clicked, and just a white rectangle came up. So he said, and here is me standing in front of the waterfall, click. And here's Roger Moore with his shirt off, click. And here's a great big tarantula on my pillow in my tent. And he did the talk, and the people had to imagine the slides. And he said it was the best one he ever did. They loved it. He was totally honest. He said, look, I've left my slides behind, but it's okay, because I'm going to tell you the story and you can imagine it. And he said, the tarantula was probably bigger in their mind, and Roger Moore with his shirt off looked better or whatever. And he said it was the best one that he did. So would it be that bad? How bad would it be if you turned up even without your slides? The answer is, you'll be fine. And anyway, even if they boo you off the stage and throw fruit at you, you're still alive. It's still a first world problem. So the things that you can affect and the things you can't, forget the ones you can't. The things you can affect, how can you avoid them? How bad would it be if it happened? And how will you handle it if it happens? So how do we reduce it happening? And also, if it does happen, what will we do? And this is really what they do with risk analysis. They look at all of the possible risks. They think about how likely and how serious they are. And then they have mitigation. So the mitigation is to make it either less likely to happen or less serious. So if you think of something like fire, we make fire less likely to happen by checking the electrical wiring and making sure people don't store petrol in a bucket under their desk. And we also make it less serious by having sprinkler systems and fire escapes, fire extinguishers, and all that, fire alarms and everything. So in the end, it's quite unlikely to happen. And if it does, it won't be that bad. And you can do that with anything that's making you anxious. How do I make it less likely to happen? And how do I make it less serious if it does happen? Suppose you're worrying about a key member of staff who might leave. Make it less likely by looking after them and being nice to them, etc., possibly even giving them a pay rise. And make it less serious by making sure you've got other people who are trained up to do parts of their job. And maybe if you're anxious about bringing in a new system, you could run the old and the new processes in parallel for a while, just as an overlap, so you know you're okay. If you're worried about whether you can deliver something by a particular date, then allow extra time. Get some contingency in there so that you know you're okay. And what I do with contingency, and this is all in my project management course, is to be 90% safe, you need to go halfway between the average and the worst. So if you think something is going to take you 6 weeks, but it might take as long as 10 weeks, so somewhere between 6 and 10, the halfway point is 8. So you need to allow 8 weeks. And if you allow 8 weeks, or you promise 8 weeks to the customer, you're going to be 90% safe. Of course, if you can allow 10 weeks, that's best of all, because then you're 100% safe. But if you have to put in some sort of an estimate in a bid or something like that, ideally you get 90% safe by going halfway. So put in some contingency. Also, get as much information as possible. If you're worrying about a risk, the more information you can get about how likely it is to happen and what you will do if it does happen, maximum information, because you want to avoid fear of the unknown. So if you're worrying about giving a presentation, the more you can find out about the audience in advance, the better. And usually they'll be only too glad to tell you. If you get there nice and early and sit at the back, if you're talking at a conference, you can get a feel for what the people are like and discover that they're perfectly nice and it's all fine. So the more information you can get, the better. And finally, with risk, just think about how might it be an opportunity. So if you're really anxious about, let's say, something really bad, like losing your job, obviously you can make that less likely, you can make it less serious if it happens by having a backup plan, but tell yourself it might even be an opportunity. Maybe if I did lose my job, heaven forbid, I would get a better one. Maybe it would be good for me to come out of my comfort zone. Maybe I might discover a job that I love even more than the one I do at the moment. Perhaps it would be an opportunity. So a little bit of positive thinking about risk. So that's what I want to say about risk. Anything that's making you anxious, treat it as a risk, make it less likely, make it less serious, get as much information as possible, have lots of plans, and think about how it might be an opportunity.